Good morning, guys, and welcome to the podcast. I'm really delighted about today's guest from Atlanta, Georgia, John Makarewicz. He's from Ferris Capital Partners, and to talk about real estate, capital, and he's no stranger to the show. We have so many guests, and I'm really happy to talk real estate and what he does. John, welcome.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here, Christopher.
Yeah, briefly introduce yourself, and we'll dive into the questions.
Yeah, I've been real estate adjacent my whole career. So when I first got out of college, I actually started in residential real estate, just selling homes, working with buyers and sellers. But in about 2008, I joined forces with a man named Mark Spain and actually just started as an agent, but we ended up befriending each other on a professional level. And just over the years, he would layer in additional responsibilities. And to cut a long story short, we built up a residential real estate team and then started our own brokerage in 2016. And it was an exciting time. We started opening offices in many different parts of the Southeast, and that led to a private equity exit in 2021. So in 23, I always say it was like sprinting a marathon for 15 years, building this business alongside my business partner and our incredible team. So I learned a lot in that period of time about leadership and that startup mentality. And candidly, I stay in that mentality. I always take that approach of it. The system could always improve. We could always have a better result. And so in 23, I joined forces with my current business partner, Mark Ferris, to start Ferris Capital Partners. And we acquire apartment buildings, renovate them to add value, forcing appreciation with the goal of doubling our investors' equity over a 5-year hold period. So it's an exciting time to be back into a true startup and building and growing again.
Yeah, I love that. And we'll talk about the mindsets and the habits and strategies that made you successful. We'll talk about one thing I have for the listeners and viewers. Where are we in the real estate cycle? Because we just came off this peak interest rates, and we got a regime change, and now we've got a threat of tariffs and wars. Where are we? How are you seeing the playbook for real estate?
Yeah, it's such an interesting time, right? And I'm learning, I'm 44. It's all times are interesting, really, when you think about it, because it's like, if I really thought about my 20-year business career, there's maybe been like a 3-week stretch where I'm like, wow, the wind's just blowing in our direction. Everything's going great, right? There's always a challenge. There's always a problem. It could be political, could be on an economic level. It could be you have a bad hire and they're causing challenges within your business, right? So there's always something. And with residential real estate right now, I'm a bit removed from it, but I still pay attention because I still have ownership in my prior business there, Mark Spain Real Estate. And I think this year is going to be a very telling year, because last year what was interesting is the rates tripled, but home values kept rising dramatically. And I think a lot of folks are just staying put, right? And so if you're not selling, and really, when you look at the demographics, I think what a lot of people thought would happen, say 10, 15 years ago, is as the baby boomers retired, they would start to sell off their homes and downsize. But that never really happened. And so they're all staying in place. And then you add to the fact that the cost of building a new home, just from 2018 to 2021, the cost of building a new home went up 40%. That was before all the tariff talk, right? And so we haven't really seen the full impacts of the tariffs, but a lot of the things, if we say Canada, for example, lumber, copper, you look at China, steel. And so a lot of the materials that go into building a home are sourced from foreign countries, right? And so these tariffs, if they really truly kick in, it's going to continue to increase the cost of building that new home. I have this fear that home values will continue to rise as disproportionately to, say, inflation and all these other factors. I have a 21-year-old, and he's literally telling me, Dad, I don't ever see a world where I'll buy a home. And I encourage him to change his mindset around that, because if you think something's not going to happen, you're probably right. But he's not wrong in the sense that my first home was like 2,200 square feet. I paid $260,000 for it, and I was right in a great suburban market with great schools. And that very same townhome today is worth like $500,000. And it's crazy right now. On the commercial side, offices are having some challenges in certain markets, but because of the return to work, we're seeing some pockets that are seeing improvement. Retail is good, but a little challenged. Industrial kind of got overbuilt. Why we like apartments, Christopher, is at the end of the day, like, you always need a place to live. And because the home values continue to increase, more and more people are choosing to rent or being forced to rent. And for the first time, really, in the history of the United States, it's more affordable to own than it is to rent, to the tune of about $1,200. So in other words, to rent a home is $1,200 less expensive than to buy that same home.
Hmm.
Because, what we haven't even talked about, yeah, the cost of the home, but the cost of insurance is rising. As property values go up, insurance goes up. So it's just becoming more and more unaffordable to own. I think the next year will be very telling with residential real estate in particular, because we are starting to see the pace of home sales slow down. And I think that's a product of consumer confidence dropping because of the tariff talk, and people are waiting to see how that will come together. And yeah, it's a fascinating time. But I do, as somebody who's involved in real estate, I have a lot of concerns for future generations and their ability, because I just know, and you look at the numbers, owning a home is one of the key differentiating factors in building wealth in your life, right? Because you own a home for 5 or 7 years, it's naturally appreciating, you're building equity. And the average homeowner has a net worth of about $300,000, $400,000, where the average renter really doesn't have that. And gosh, it was the American dream, right? Owning a home with a white picket fence and a steady job. And yeah, I'd stop shy of saying it's scary, but it is getting scary. And so I really think this year is going to tell the tale. It'll be interesting to see how the rest of the year shakes out. For example, in Florida, we're seeing a lot of homes just sitting on the market for years and years, 6, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months. One particular area that I think will be very challenged, and I think we're already starting to see it, are second home vacation markets, right? Because so many people bought them post-pandemic, because we saw an explosion in short-term rentals, right? And so more and more people were taking vacations after that post-pandemic bottleneck broke loose. But I'll just use a real example. So my wife and I, we have 3 kids. We rent this beach house every year in the same location. And usually you have to book that thing 5 to 6 months in advance. And we decided we weren't 100% sure we were going to go this summer. And I went on there a week ago, and basically June and July were wide open. And I just was like, how? And the rate dropped. So it was great. If you own that home, all of a sudden you had it full basically 4, 5, 6 months out of the year, and now it's empty. And so I think you're going to start to see a lot of people make those decisions to sell. So I think you're going to see some challenge markets, particularly second home markets, and then other areas of the United States where maybe there's less economic diversity and job opportunities. I wish I had a crystal ball, but I don't think values are going to drop. I just think you're going to see a reduction in the amount of transactions that occur, which we're already seeing today.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting is you hinted on the American dream and just the rising cost of everything. You talk about business rhythms that create massive success. How are you tuning into that to position yourself for maximum gains?
Yeah. For example, we buy apartment buildings, right? And there have been just far fewer transactions this year and last year than in previous years. So on a typical sort of normal market, an apartment building, about 20% of apartment buildings, give or take, trade on a given year. And that has not been the case the past few years. So we're seeing fewer deals coming out. And it takes about 300 deals for us to see and review to find one that works for our model. It just comes back to, okay, what are the business rhythms? In our world, we know that 90+% of these deals trade through a broker. So we increase the amount of broker contacts we make, right? And we try to build stronger relationships with those brokers. For example, our acquisition director, this goes back to rhythm. So every morning at 8:30 a.m., we have a team huddle where everybody in the company jumps on this quick call. We have a software we use called Metronome Systems, and everybody reports on 3 things. It's some good news or an update from the previous day, their number one metric. Now, most of our team members might have 3 or 4 metrics that they track, but what's that number one metric, the first domino, so to speak, that makes everything easier if you do that? And then your number one priority for the day. So our acquisitions director on a daily basis is reporting on how many broker connections he's made. And I'll go back about 6 months. We just weren't seeing the deal flow, and his target was 5 meaningful connections a day with brokers. We increased that to 10. We started seeing better results. So then I got involved. So I started doing 5 meaningful connections as well, just to supplement the acquisition person. Every business has those key metrics, those leverage points, if you will. And you have to know what those are. And it does take some experimentation, right? You might think you have the right one, but you don't get the results. So then you have to be willing to take a step back and say, okay, we thought this was the right metric, but it's not getting the results. Do we need to rethink this, or do we just simply need to do more? So having those huddles on a daily basis where everybody's reporting, you start to be able to see themes, connection points, or bottlenecks or constraints within the business, right? And I think it's critical, any business leader, any entrepreneur, even if you're just working within a big corporation and you're managing a team, making sure you're checking in on a daily basis and having a meaningful conversation about those most important tasks and ensuring those things get done on a daily basis is how you can muscle through really any economy. And that's a great example, just those huddles and those metrics and making sure that you're really being thoughtful and interrogating those metrics on a regular basis to ensure they're the right ones that move the dial.
Interesting. Yeah, your response really reminds me of just like how a lot of the pro team, pro sports, they think about things, and when things are quite challenging, they can't go into the details and how you measure and how you maximize. What I also found interesting is in your bio is you went from realtor and then you went from single family and now you're doing syndication investing. And for the listeners and viewers, if they're thinking like they're getting priced out or it's not worth their time to be a landlord, what is the mindset shift that you need to go from realtor and landlord to actually raising funds for larger projects?
Yeah. It's interesting. I would say the mindset of how I think about things is that really at the end of the day, in all businesses, whatever you're in, right? It's no different than if we're manufacturing a cog, right? It's what are the constraints? What are the challenges? What are the problems here? And how can we build a system around those things? And so when I think about being a realtor, I had a very systemized process because we ran a large team. And so when I transitioned into management, I was shocked because I'm not saying I'm special or different, but I can't sleep at night if I think I missed a detail. And so I keep a notebook. Now I leverage like Google Tasks. So every day I can see what my top 6 activities that I have to get done that day are. So I tend to be very organized when it comes to those tasks. But that's my behavioral style. That comes naturally to me, but it doesn't come as naturally to others. And for example, we would literally have situations where a seller would call and say, yeah, your agent came out yesterday. It was awesome. We were ready, but they never sent the paperwork. And so you're just like, oh gosh, how did that happen? And building out those systems and processes to make things easier for the team. So we leverage Salesforce. So we just had automated reminders built in. It's, did you send the paperwork? Did the paperwork come back? You need to follow up. And so then having people monitoring that to ensure that all those tasks got completed. Things have a way of compounding. So I think at the end of the day, whatever business you're in, it's about what are the systems and what are the most important tasks, right? And if you think about those things every day, I read about this years and years ago. It's called the Ivy Lee method. And the story is that I think it was General Electric back in the 1930s, they weren't happy with how things were going. And it might have been General Motors. It was one of the general companies, but they brought in this business consultant and he just said, if everybody wrote down the 6 most important things they need to get done for that day in order of importance, and then you tackle those things in order. So let's just say you only get through 4 because they're big tasks. Then task 5 and 6 become task 1 and 2 the next day, and you create 4 more. And sometimes they're not massive action, right? It's just moving things down the field a little bit, so to speak. And then looking at, this is another area that I think is super critical, because when I think about real estate, residential, and I think about what we're doing here, thinking about that client experience in a very thoughtful way. And I'll give you some examples. By no means are we perfect at Ferris Capital, but I put my own information inquiring about investing in other people's deals that do things similar to us, because I like investing in real estate. So I'm genuinely, hey, I want this information. And sometimes I never get a phone call. In some cases, I get 2 text messages a day, and that's annoying. Or I get an email, but then I never get any follow-up. And so it's just such a missed opportunity. And so in our world, it's like we have a follow-up cadence. So when a new lead comes in, action plan kicks in, make that first contact attempt. If you don't reach it, that reminder happens for the next 7 days. And then if we don't get with them in 7 days, we taper off and start our follow-up on a weekly basis. But just thinking through, like, if you were a customer in this business, what would you want? And how would you want to be treated? And then just figuring out ways to do those things. I see a lot of businesses that do a great job attracting the lead or even the customer, but then their onboarding experience is an afterthought, right? How do you go from I'm interested to now I'm a successful customer or client? And so for us, Mark and I thought about it. We said, I'm an investor, and this isn't a joke. Like, I'm invested in some deals. I put $500,000 in one deal in particular, and I get an update every kind of 9 months or so. I can't really figure out when they send them. It just shows up in my inbox one day. And the good news is it's going well. We said, you know what if we guaranteed our investors on the 30th of every month, they're going to get an update no matter what. And if we miss it, we owe them a steak dinner for them and their family. And everybody smiles and laughs at that, but it's a real thing, because if we miss one update on one of our deals, that's like a $15,000 mistake. So you better believe we're going to make sure that update goes out on the 30th. So it just goes back to systems, right? That's the system. We guarantee it by this. If this doesn't happen, then that happens. And that's painful. So we're going to make sure that never happens, right? I think at the end of the day, it's just about being thoughtful about not only bringing in the client, but that investor experience and how that investor or that client experience feels throughout the transaction. So transitioning from residential, to put a bow on it, to this, it's not all that different. It's just a different product we're selling. It's the same thought process, right? How do we make this easier, faster, safer, simpler?
And I really enjoyed this conversation. And the other thing that I found interesting thing is your leadership style. It has a lot of influences of John Wooden and Coach K. How have these mentors and influences shaped your approach to leadership and investing and success in general?
Yeah. So John Wooden on leadership, it's one of the best leadership books. It might be the best leadership book ever written, in my opinion. In fact, I read it after reading a lot of other leadership books, and I realized that a lot of people are just taking his lessons and repackaging them. And so, for example, if you read this book, on day one, when a new team member would show up, didn't matter if they were a freshman or a senior or starter or whatever, they would spend a full day just on how to put your socks on correctly and how to tie your shoes. Now, everybody, once again, laughs at that a little bit, but you have to think this was in an era where there wasn't elastic in the socks. They were wearing Converse sneakers. We're not dealing with Nike, like high technology stuff. And so his thing was, if we get this wrong and your sock gets a little bunched up in your shoe there and you get a blister mid game, it's going to impact your performance. So we're just going to focus on getting the small detail right. And so that was one of my biggest takeaways, is like the small details are almost more important than the bigger ones in a lot of ways. Making sure you say somebody's name correctly, making sure you do what, if you say you're going to send the paperwork by the end of the day, send the paperwork by the end of the day, just honoring your commitments. And I think the other thing is he's got this pyramid of success, and success is not winning. It's showing up every day and doing the best you can do in that given situation. Now, his is much more, I didn't read that verbatim, but it's that basic concept or idea. And so when you bring that to leadership, it's nobody gets it right 100% of the time. Your team members will make mistakes. You'll make mistakes. It's just about what do you do about it, right? You pick yourself back up and you get back out on the court and you push yourself a little bit further. It's interesting. A lot of people I know, and it's no problem. Like, I'm a big reader. I like to hold the book in my hand. This one is not on Audible. So if you're wanting to read it, you're going to have to pick it up. But I would encourage you to do it because, man, I dog-eared like every other page, highlighted the heck out of it. There is so much good information in there. So I think for me, there is a lot of commonality between business and sports because nobody finds success on their own, in my opinion. Luck always plays a factor in anybody's success, but the team is the most important thing. So if you can really bring together a group of people and give them what they need to be successful, because everybody's different, right? Like some of my team members, I need to check in with a couple of times a day. And it's not a bad thing. It's just they like to bounce ideas and they want to make sure their thinking's correct. Others I can maybe talk to once every couple of days, and they just need to put their head down and do their focused work. So it's not having one formula for everybody. And when you look at some of the most successful sports teams, that combination of coach and player is really where the magic happens. And there's so many examples where, like Joe Namath's first coach, he didn't find a lot of success, but then he found a coach that matched his style. And then boom, he's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And it's having that ability to, as I said, give people what they need to be successful, not just say, this is my style, so everybody's got to do it my way or whatever. So yeah, so I think that's it, man. I think there's a lot of similarity between sports because the team is going to be what makes you successful. And I would even say the entrepreneurs that are out there, you know, the entrepreneurs that I know that are the most successful typically have a partner, whether it's an official like partner in the business or just a trusted number two, but they can bounce ideas off of, talk through challenges and problems. So yeah, I've been very fortunate with both my business partners that there's things that were common in terms of what we would like to accomplish, but we had different behavioral styles that complemented and balanced each other out. And so I think the team is the thing, man. I talk about servant leadership a lot. And my goal as a leader is to basically give the team what they need, clear the decks, make it easier for them to do their jobs, not just sit up top and bark down orders. If that means I got to go pick up trash at one of our properties because one of our PMs quit and the property doesn't look great, I'm going to do that, whatever it takes to succeed. In fact, I had a business coach, Christopher, and he said ambition is really just the willingness to do whatever it takes to succeed. And so that's how I think about it. It's just whatever it takes. We're going to figure this out one way or another.
Yeah, excellent. And if people were inspired by your this podcast, and how can they connect with you and learn more from you and work with you?
Yeah, I'm sure my name will be here in the show notes. You can go to LinkedIn, pretty easy to find me. Not a whole lot of John Makarewicz's out there. You can go to fulloutinvesting.com. That's a website Ferris Capital Partners has created where we have a sample deal and a video on how we do things. But you can book in a time to talk with me there if you'd like to just connect. And it doesn't have to be about investing, just if you want to talk leadership, anything like that. Those would be the two best places to find me.
Excellent. I really enjoyed this podcast, and keep up the great work.
Oh, thanks so much, Christopher. I enjoyed it as well. Thanks.